Back again, and this is not what we're going to be talking about. No, today is my cousin's birthday, and so I thought I would write her a letter on this Clairefontaine Triomphe paper. This is some nice paper, and it has a line guide underneath. You can see I have a sheet pulled away, but I changed my mind. I decided instead of doing that, no, I'm going to paint a card for her, draw a card, and write a little note inside of it. This is a 90 gram per square meter paper. It's a 100% cotton. It's a treated paper. But the sizes in the United States are a little weird. We have 8.5 by 11 paper, so a half sheet, like an A5, is actually too big to fit in a standard half sheet American envelope. So you have to use the larger size card envelopes, and then you won't have any trouble folding it in half. Otherwise, you have to fold it into threes to fit it into a standard half sheet American sized envelope. So the paper again is very smooth. It's 100% cotton. It's a brilliant white. It's a good thickness. You can still see the line guide through it pretty well. And I just am going to fold this in half here. And it feels good in the hand. The pen writes pretty well with it. Sometimes it's a little slick for a ballpoint pen, but it's really not made for ballpoint. It's really performs better with a roller ball or a fountain pen here. Just want to line up the edges, but it also holds a crease really well, being 100% cotton. It holds a really nice crease, and just a nice paper. And this way I've got a good surface area to draw on. And we're going to paint on this with my extra paints. I have these two Noodler's paints, and this one's a Atramentis. This is a violet. Let me grab my paintbrush here. The paintbrush is this Artist's Loft paintbrush, and it's just an El Cheapo that I picked up at, I don't know, wherever. And I use it for all kinds of things. I use it for cleaning my pens. I use it for cleaning out nibs. And all these inks are water soluble, so we'll simply pour some water in here to be able to use as our solvent, because none of these are permanent inks or archival inks, and we can simply dip the pen in. The first we'll use is the Noodler's Apache Sunset sample that I have, and it's always good to work from light to dark, so I'll put some water down on this paper. The Clairefontaine paper performs really well wet. It's a very good paper for wet, and spread it around. It always looks a little bit like mercurochrome when I would scrape a knee at school when I was a kid, go to the nurse's office, and they'd want to mercurochrome up my legs. I like to keep these tester bottles around. They're labeled and they're convenient, and I can refill them, and again I can just dap this on thick and wet, and you'll see that the paper really responds well. Now always cap your ink samples when you're going to change colors, because if you don't, you'll find one of them is going to fall over, and it always never falls in a good direction. I'm going to just blot out my brush here a little bit, and I don't worry about this brush too much. I don't also worry about cross-contamination with these. This is the Elysium Blue, and I reloaded this to take it on a little trip so I could refill my fountain pen while I was away. But I've since used it for doing exactly what I'm doing here, kind of painting around, and so it's a little contaminated here. You can see if I wet it out a little bit. It's got a bit of green sheen to it now, so I don't really like mixing my inks too much, so I'm not going to really use this for anything else. I'll just end up doing more stuff like this, using it for coloring and painting and goofing around. But I like to keep the bottles because they're labeled, and I have a number of these, and some of them the ink has gone away. I actually own bottles of both this ink and of the Apache Sunset, and I'm just going to make a nice little card here for my cousin's birthday. And I'll send this up to her. She used to come over to our house. She was quite a bit older than my sister and I. I was 5, my sister was maybe 7. And she used to come over to our house and spend the night on the weekends once in a while, because we lived at the beach. And she always had lots of fun games to play. This is the Violets by Atramentis. And she always wanted to go over to the neighbor's house. He had a great, big, beautiful, lush green lawn in front of his house. And it actually had one of those pins that they put, the hole pin at a golf course, right in the middle of his beautiful green lawn. It was just this immaculate green lawn. And I thought everybody in every neighborhood must have a neighbor who has a beautiful green lawn with a with a golf pin flag, with a pinhole flag sticking out of it. And I never thought anything of it. But she used to like to come over, my cousin, and go over to his house and play on that beautiful lawn, because in her neighborhood it was all rocks, and she lived out in the desert, so it was just rocks and gravel, and anything that was green was usually painted on the ground, where they actually painted their, they didn't have lawns in front of their homes, they just painted the concrete brown. They painted the concrete green. Well, it turns out that the fellow who lived in this house with the big lawn in front of it, he was actually a golf pro, and he was retired, and he used to teach students at his house. So he would invite the students over, and they would putt. It literally was a putting green in front of his home. That's why he had the pin on it. But one of the fun things was, about this time of year, around my cousin's birthday, for Easter, he would have a big party, because in his backyard, he had a bit of a rough lawn in his backyard that faced a farmer's field. Mr. Edwards had this big farmer's field, and it was left to just go fallow during the winter, and so the golf pro used to use that field in his backyard for his students to practice their driving. And so around this time every year, around Easter, we would have this big Easter egg hunt. He called it an Easter egg hunt. But what we were doing was, he was giving us the driving range baskets to go out into the field and collect all the golf balls that had been hit out there by his students during the winter months, while he was teaching them and working on their swing in his backyard. And we would bring back these baskets full of balls, and he would give us prizes, chocolate eggs, or chocolate bunny, or something like that. And it was always really great. Now, this is looking about right, so we're just going to let this dry for a minute, and then we will see what we do next. So try to flatten it out, and let's let that dry. Okay, we're back, and it's been a few minutes. It's still wet. You can see it's not that dry, but we will take my dip pen, and we'll write on it, write happy birthday here. I'm going to use this ink. This is a dip pen ink, and you can use fountain pen in dip pens, but don't you ever use dip inks in fountain pens. It'll ruin your fountain pen. So I keep this on the side so that the glitter doesn't all settle down to the bottom. And you never want to shake these, because if you do, they'll get bubbles in them, and then you can't write with them. So you've got to agitate it a little bit to get the particles to move up into the medium. And that medium may be some kind of a gum arabic or some other kind of synthetic latex. And I'm going to load this into the feed, or the reservoir, on top of my music nib here. This is a 1.5 music nib. And it's funny, when I had all these calligraphy things, this is a Clairefontaine scratch paper. You want to make sure that you're using the same piece of scratch paper to get the nib running as you're going to write on. Otherwise, you may have different surface tension, and the ink will either blot or just not run properly. I'm going to speed this up so that we don't have to sit through me doing my crummy calligraphy. And it's funny, because I never really wrote letters with these pens. I used to use them for writing music, copying music. And when I was in high school, I did a little bit of calligraphy with them, but people would start asking me to write cards to their parents and things, and I never really liked doing that too much. And as you can see, the calligraphy pen will actually hold quite a bit of ink in the reservoir, enough for me to write happy birthday and even put on this little finial. Well, there it is. And yeah, it dries pretty quickly. It has good adhesion, and on the inside, as you can see, it handles the water pretty well. There's a little bit of bleed through, but not really too bad. It didn't print over, and so I've got plenty of room to write my missive to my cousin, and well, that's all good. So that's it. Bye.